The room was cold and dark, the stone walls wet with drops of water that fell from cracks in the ceiling. The air smelled of rust and old blood, and in the center of that place sat the alien woman with her wrists chained to the ground, her back against the wall, her body trembling in silence. She had been told since childhood that humans were monsters, that they enjoyed breaking bones and making screams echo, that once a human touched you there would only be pain. And now she was waiting for the sound of heavy boots that would mean her turn had come. Her heart beat fast. Too fast, like it would break out of her chest. She pulled once against the iron shackles, but they cut her skin, leaving a thin line of blood. She closed her eyes and tried to breathe, but the fear was stronger than air. From the hall outside, metal doors groaned, slow and heavy, as if the whole world was opening just to throw her into the arms of pain. Her ears picked the echo of steps one by one, closer and closer, each step like thunder rolling inside her head. She wanted to curl into herself, to disappear, to be nothing so no one could touch her. But the chains would not let her. She was forced to face whatever was coming. The door opened. Light spilled into the room. Not warm light, but sharp, cutting like a blade. She blinked fast, her eyes burned, and in that light stood the figure of a man. A human. He was taller than her, his shoulders broad. His shadow stretched long across the floor, his face half hidden in the glow, his breath slow, steady, almost calm, and yet his presence was heavy, pressing against her chest like a mountain. She pulled back, though there was nowhere to go, her lips shaking, her voice stuck in her throat. The story screamed inside her head. This was the moment of pain, this was the end of whatever she had left. The human stepped forward, his boots crunching on the wet floor. The sound echoed too loud. Her stomach tightened. She closed her eyes and waited for the strike. The scream, the breaking, but nothing happened. Instead of iron fists or burning rods, there was silence, only the sound of water dripping. Slowly she opened one eye. The human was kneeling in front of her, not with a weapon, but with a small metal flask in his hand. He placed it on the ground near her. "Drink," he said, his voice low, not cruel, not mocking. Just simple, one word. She did not move. Her mind screamed this was a trick. The moment she reached, he would hurt her. He would laugh. He would remind her that humans give nothing without pain. He sighed softly. His eyes met hers, not burning. Not sharp, but calm. Almost tired. The kind of eyes she had never seen in her life. Eyes without cruelty. Her throat was dry, every swallow hurt. She wanted the water, but fear kept her frozen. The human noticed. He leaned closer. His hand reached for the chain on her wrist. She panicked, pulling back so hard that the shackle cut deeper into her skin. Her breath came fast like fire in her chest. She braced herself for the sting of pain, for the cruelty she knew was coming. But instead the iron lock clicked, the shackle loosened, and her wrist fell free. Her eyes went wide. Confusion spread through her body like a storm. Why? Why would a human free her? He stepped back a little, showing his hands open. No weapon, no threat, only that calm voice again. "Drink." Her fingers shook as she reached. Slowly, like touching fire. She picked up the flask, lifted it to her lips. The first drop of water touched her tongue. Cool, real, not poisoned, not bitter, just water. It slid down her throat, and the pain of dryness faded. Her chest relaxed a little, but her mind did not. It screamed louder. This was wrong. This was dangerous. Humans do not give kindness. Humans only take. She looked at him again, waiting, searching for the hidden knife. The sudden strike, but he only sat there, watching, his breath steady, his face unreadable. The silence grew heavy between them, her fear and his calm clashing in the small room. She whispered, voice cracking, Why are you doing this?" He did not answer, not yet, only leaned back on one knee as if he was not the captor, not the master, but something else, something she could not name. Her body trembled still, every muscle tight, but inside her chest, something else moved, not just fear, something small and confusing, something that should not be there. Hope. She crushed the thought at once. Hope was poison. Hope was how pain entered deeper, yet the human's steady gaze would not let it die completely. She curled her arms around herself, holding the flask close, torn between fear of the monster she had been told about and the strange gentleness sitting across from her. The chain still bound her ankles, her freedom was not real. But in that single moment she realized something she had never believed before. Not all pain comes from humans, and not all humans bring pain. The fear did not vanish, but it cracked, just enough for a question to rise in her mind. If he did not come to hurt her, then what did he want? The flask was still in her hands, the last drop of water sliding against her lips, her throat no longer dry. Yet her heart was beating even faster than before. She did not understand this human. She had prepared herself for pain, for cruelty, but he had given her water. She stared at him, her eyes sharp, full of mistrust, her body pressed against the cold wall, her hands clutching the flask like a weapon, though it was nothing more than metal. The human sat on the floor near her, not close enough to touch, but close enough that she could feel his presence. His steady breathing echoed in the small room, his face calm, his eyes watching her, but not in the way others did. Not with hunger or hatred, but with something she could not name. Why? She whispered again, her voice shaking. Why do you help me? The human did not answer quickly. He looked down at the ground, his fingers brushing against the dirt, like he was thinking of something far away. Then he spoke, slow and quiet. Because you don't deserve chains. Her body tensed. The words were simple, too simple. She almost laughed, bitter and broken. All humans say one thing before they strike. Do you think I don't know your games? He looked at her then, and for the first time she saw no lie in his eyes. No mocking smile, no mask, only honesty. And that honesty scared her more than any weapon could. He reached again, his hand moving toward the second chain on her other wrist. Her breath caught, her body stiffened. She wanted to scream for him to stop. She wanted to fight, but her strength was gone. Her spirit cracked long before, so she braced herself once more. The lock clicked, the shackle fell. Her hand was free. Her mouth opened in shock. Her mind screamed that this was wrong. This was dangerous. But her body trembled with relief. The blood rushed back into her fingers, warmth spreading where cold iron had pressed for too long. She pulled her arms close to her chest, no longer chained but still a prisoner of fear. The human leaned back again, resting his elbows on his knees, and spoke with a low, steady tone. They lied to you about us. Her eyes burned, anger rising. Lied? I saw what your kind does. I heard the screams, I know the stories. You are all the same. He shook his head slowly. No, we are not. The silence after those words was heavy. Her thoughts spun like a storm. She wanted to throw the flask at his head, to curse him, to demand he prove his words. But something inside her stopped. Something fragile. Something she did not want to admit. Curiosity. She hated herself for it. Hated that she wanted to ask more. Hated that his calm voice had planted a small seed in her mind. The human noticed the change in her eyes. He did not smile, he did not press, he simply sat there, like he had all the time in the world. Like he was waiting for her to decide. Her stomach twisted. Fear and hunger mixed inside her. The sound of her own emptiness broke the silence. She cursed under her breath, her body betraying her weakness. The human opened a pouch at his side, pulling out a small piece of bread. Rough and dry, but real food. The smell filled the cold air. Her hand shook as her eyes followed it. He placed it on the floor between them, not forcing it into her hands, not moving closer, just placing it there, and then leaning back again. Her pride screamed not to touch it. Her fear warned it was poisoned, yet her hunger clawed at her insides. Minutes passed, heavy, endless. And finally she reached out, fingers trembling. She snatched the bread and pulled it back, chewing fast, her eyes never leaving him, ready for the pain that might follow. But no pain came, only silence, only the sound of her chewing, the bread breaking in her mouth, the food filling the emptiness in her stomach. Tears burned her eyes without warning. She hated the weakness, hated that he had given her something she could not refuse, hated that her body felt alive again because of a human. She wiped her face with the back of her hand, her voice bitter. What do you want from me? Nothing is free, not from your kind. The human looked at her for a long moment. His expression unreadable, then said softly, I want nothing, except for you to survive. Her heart skipped. The words cut deeper than chains ever did. Survive. She had forgotten that word. She had stopped believing it belonged to her. For the first time she turned her head fully, looking at him not as an enemy, not as a monster, but as a puzzle she could not solve. Who was this man? Why would a human risk so much to free her, feed her, and ask for nothing in return? The confusion gnawed at her mind, making her restless, and still, beneath the fear, beneath the anger, another feeling grew quietly. A dangerous feeling. Trust. She shook her head quickly, forcing it away. It could not be, it must not be. Humans were pain, humans were death. Yet the human sitting across from her refused to fit into that truth. And that was the most terrifying thing of all. The alien woman sat against the wall, the chains from her wrists now lying broken on the floor, her fingers still sore and red from the iron that had cut them, her stomach filled just enough from the dry bread. but her heart was heavy with confusion. She had braced herself for pain, yet pain had not come. She had prepared for cruelty, yet she had been given food and water. Her mind tried to hold on to the story she grew up with, that humans were monsters, always cruel, but the man in front of her refused to fit into that story. He had not moved for a long time, only sitting quietly, watching her from a distance, his eyes calm, his hands resting on his knees, no weapon, no threat, only silence. And that silence pressed against her chest. Finally, he spoke, his voice low and steady. "You are safe. At least while I am here." The words made her flinch because safety was not real. Not for someone like her. She shook her head, her voice sharp. "Safe? In this place of chains? Do not mock me." He leaned forward a little, not close enough to touch, but enough for her to see his eyes clearly. "I do not mock," he said simply. "I mean what I say." She looked away quickly, her body tense, her hands clutched together as if she could hold herself from breaking. But then she felt it, a hand brushing against her arm. Her whole body froze, the air caught in her lungs. Her heart pounded like thunder. This was it, the pain she had been waiting for, the cruelty she had feared. She braced herself for the strike, for the iron grip, for the hurt that always followed human touch. But the hand was steady, gentle, warm. Her eyes shot to him, wide with disbelief. His fingers rested against her skin, not like a master to a slave, not like a torturer to his victim, but like a healer checking a wound. His touch careful, almost soft. Her breath came fast. Her voice broke. Why are you touching me?" His gaze did not leave hers, his voice calm. "Because you are hurt." She pulled her arm back quickly, pressing it against her chest, her body trembling, the warmth of his hand still burning against her skin, not with pain, but with something more dangerous, comfort. She shook her head, whispering to herself, No, this is wrong. You are a human. You should not. Her words trailed away, because even as she tried to deny it, the truth was there. She had felt no pain from him, only kindness, and that kindness was harder to endure than cruelty. She closed her eyes tight, tears pricking at the corners, her voice a whisper. "I don't understand. Why do you care?" The human sighed softly, his shoulders heavy as if carrying a weight she could not see. "Because I remember what chains feel like," he said. Her eyes opened in shock, staring at him. "You?" she asked, disbelief shaking her tone. "A human, in chains?" He nodded slowly, not explaining further, but his eyes told her he was not lying. His voice was not false, and suddenly she saw him not as a faceless monster, but as someone who knew the same darkness. The silence that followed was not empty this time. It was filled with something new, something heavy between them. Her body trembled less, her breathing slowed, and though fear still lived in her heart, a small seed of something else began to grow. Trust he noticed the change, but he did not press it. Instead, he opened the pouch again and pulled out a small cloth, gently offering it to her. "For your wounds," he said. She hesitated, her pride battling her need, her mistrust fighting her longing. But in the end, she reached out, her fingers brushing against his as she took the cloth. The touch was brief, but it sent a shock through her, not of pain, but of warmth. Real warmth, the kind she had not felt in years. Her chest tightened, her throat ached, she wanted to hate him. But the truth was harder to fight. He had shown her more kindness in 1 hour than anyone else in her whole life. As she pressed the cloth against her bleeding wrist, her eyes flicked back to him, and for the first time she did not see a monster. She saw a man, tired and quiet but strong. Her mind screamed this was dangerous, her heart whispered it was real, and she did not know which voice to follow. She whispered again, almost to herself, "If you are not like the others, then what are you?" He did not smile, he did not gloat, he only said, "I am human." And for the first time in her life, those words did not sound like a curse. She sat in silence, the cloth pressed to her wrist, her heart no longer bracing for pain, but confused by the strange truth she could not escape. Not all touches brought pain, and not all humans were monsters. The alien woman sat quietly, the cloth pressed to her wrist, her eyes still fixed on the human sitting across from her, confusion storming inside her mind. She had prepared her whole life to hate humans, to fear them, to never trust their hands. But this one kept breaking every truth she thought she knew. Her wrists were free, yet her ankles were still bound with thick iron, heavy enough to stop her from standing, heavy enough to remind her she was still a prisoner. The human looked at the chains, his brow tightening, his jaw firm, as if he hated the sight of them. He reached for the lock at her ankle and her breath caught again. Fear rising sharp and fast. "No," she whispered, pulling her legs back as far as the chain would let her. "Don't touch them, don't play games with me." He paused, his hand stopping in midair, his eyes meeting hers, calm but steady. "I am not playing," he said quietly. "These chains should not hold you." Her chest tightened. Anger mixing with fear, her voice cracked. "Why? Why do you care if they hold me or not? Humans do not free their captives. They keep them, they break them, She stopped, her throat closing as memories of screams filled her head. She shook, pressing her hands against her ears, as if to block the ghosts of voices that still haunted her. The human leaned closer, his tone firm but not harsh. "Look at me," she hesitated, trembling. But slowly she lifted her eyes, and in his gaze she did not see cruelty. "Only strength, do you trust me?" he asked. The word stabbed her because the truth was she did not know. Part of her screamed, "Never, never trust." Part of her whispered, "Maybe, just maybe." And that whisper was dangerous. I don't know," she admitted, her voice breaking. He nodded, not disappointed, not angry, only calm. "That is enough," he said. And before she could stop him, his hand moved, quick and sure. The lock clicked. The shackle fell from her ankle. The sound of the chain hitting the stone floor echoed like thunder in the small room. Louder than anything she had ever heard, it rang in her ears, it rang in her chest, and for a moment she forgot how to breathe. She pulled her legs close, rubbing the raw skin where the iron had cut. The marks red and deep, freedom feeling unreal, like a dream that would vanish if she closed her eyes. She looked at him in shock, her voice trembling. Why would you do this?" His answer was simple. "Because no one deserves to live in chains." The words hit her harder than any whip, harder than any strike, because they were true, painfully true, and she had never heard them before. Not from anyone. Her eyes burned, tears rising. She turned her face away, ashamed of her weakness, but he did not mock her. He did not speak again, he only waited, his silence stronger than words. She tried to stand, but her legs were weak. They shook under her. The chains had stolen her strength. She stumbled forward, and before she hit the ground, his hands caught her. Her body froze again. His arms steady around her, his touch firm but not harsh. She had braced for pain, but none came. Instead, she felt held, safe for a moment she did not want to believe. Her heart pounded, her breath shallow. She pushed herself back quickly, shaking her head. Don't touch me like that," she said, her voice thin. He stepped back at once, giving her space, respecting the wall she had built. But his eyes never left hers. "You are free now," he said, his tone calm, almost final. Free. The word felt heavy in her chest, too heavy to believe. She looked down at the broken chains on the ground, then back at him, her voice whispering, "Am I?" He nodded slowly, but she could see the truth in his eyes. Freedom was not simple. Not while enemies still walked the halls outside. Not while the world still hunted her kind. The sound of distant boots echoed suddenly, sharp and loud, coming from the corridor. Her body stiffened, fear rushing back like a storm. He turned his head toward the door, his jaw set, his hand reaching for the blade at his belt, his voice low and certain. "We have to move." Her eyes widened. Her stomach twisted. "Move? Where?" "Away from here," he said firmly. "If you stay, they will find you again. If you come with me, maybe you will have a chance." Her chest ached, torn between terror and the strange new trust pulling inside her. She wanted to run far, to disappear, but her legs were weak, her heart weaker, and the only thing standing between her and the guards was him. The footsteps grew louder, closer. The door shook as if fists were banging against it. Her breath came fast. She looked at him again. For the first time, she did not brace for pain. She braced for choice, and the choice was simple but terrifying. Stay in chains, or trust the human who had broken them. The sound of boots thundered in the corridor, louder and closer with each second. The alien woman pressed her back to the wall, her eyes wide with fear, her breath short and sharp. She was free of chains but not free of danger. The human stood tall, his shoulders tense, his hand gripping the blade at his belt, his eyes fixed on the door. "Stay behind me," he whispered. His tone calm but strong, her heart twisted. Every instinct screamed at her to run, to hide, but there was nowhere to go. The room was small, the walls thick. The only exit was the very door the guards were about to break through. The metal shook as fists pounded against it. Voices shouted in a language she knew too well. Orders, anger, the promise of pain. Her legs trembled. Her stomach churned. She whispered, "We cannot fight them." The human glanced at her, his eyes steady. "We don't have to fight them all. only enough to escape before she could reply. The door burst open. Light spilled into the room. 3 guards rushed in, their weapons raised. Their eyes locking onto her. Her body froze, terror pinning her in place, but the human moved first. Faster than she thought possible, his blade flashed. The first guard fell with a cry. The second swung his weapon. Sparks flew as steel clashed. The third shouted for reinforcements. "Move!" The human barked, grabbing her arm, pulling her through the gap he had made. Her legs stumbled but somehow carried her. The hallway was narrow and long. Torches on the walls threw jagged shadows. Behind them, more voices rose. The chase had begun. Her breath came fast, her chest burned. She tried to keep up. Her bare feet slapped against the stone floor. Every step felt like it would fail. But his grip on her arm was steady. Guiding, pulling, never letting go. Arrows whistled past them, striking the walls. One scraped her shoulder. She cried out, stumbling, but he pulled her close, shielding her with his own body. His voice urgent but steady. "Keep running." They turned a corner, down a stairway. The air grew colder, damp. She could hear water rushing somewhere below. Her heart pounded, fear mixed with the strange fire of survival. At the bottom of the stairway, 2 more guards appeared. Blocking their path, her breath caught, despair crushing her chest, but the human did not slow. He pushed her against the wall gently. "Stay here," he ordered. Before she could protest, he charged, his blade cutting fast and hard. Steel rang against steel, the hall filled with the clash of battle, sparks lighting the darkness. She pressed her hands over her mouth, praying without words. 1 guard fell, then the other. The human's shoulder bleeding, but his stance strong. He grabbed her hand again. "Come." They ran deeper. The sound of rushing water grew louder, the air thick with damp mist. Finally, the corridor opened into a wide underground tunnel. A river cut through the stone, its dark surface moving fast. She froze, staring at the water. "We cannot cross that," she whispered. Fear shaking her voice, he pulled her forward. "We have no choice," he said, his tone firm. "They are right behind us." She looked back. Shadows moved in the torchlight. Shouts echoed closer. The guards were coming. Her chest tightened. She shook her head. "I can't. I'll drown." His hands gripped her shoulders. Steady and strong, his eyes locked onto hers. "You will not drown, not while I hold you." Her lips trembled. Her body trembled. The fear was too much. But something in his voice cut through it. The certainty, the promise. Before she could argue, he lifted her into his arms. Her gasp caught in her throat. She braced for pain, but instead she felt steady strength, his arms holding her as if she weighed nothing. He stepped into the river, the cold water rushing around them, pulling hard. The current fought to drag them under. She clung to him, her arms around his neck, her heart racing. The water rose to his chest, then his shoulders. The current tried to tear them apart, but his grip never loosened. His breath came harsh, his muscles straining. Behind them, torches appeared at the tunnel's mouth. Voices shouted, arrows fired. Some struck the water near them, splashing high but none touched. The human pushed forward step by step, each one a battle, the river roaring around them. The alien woman buried her face against him, her tears mixing with the spray of water. She whispered against his neck, "Why do you risk this for me?" "Why?" His answer came through gritted teeth, strong and certain. "Because you deserve to live." Her heart ached at the words. So simple, so impossible, but so true finally. His feet found the far bank. He stumbled but did not fall, climbing out of the water, placing her down gently on the stone, his chest heaving with effort. She collapsed to her knees, coughing, shaking, alive, free of chains and free of the dungeon, her eyes wide with disbelief. The human stood beside her, dripping wet, his blade still in his hand, his eyes scanning the shadows, always ready, always steady. She looked up at him, her voice breaking. "You saved me." He glanced down, his expression unreadable, then gave a single nod. "We are not safe yet." And as if to prove his words true, a horn sounded in the distance, deep and loud. Echoing through the tunnels, the hunt was far from over. But for the first time in her life, she did not feel completely powerless. She was afraid, yes, but beside the strange human who had broken her chains and carried her through the river, she also felt something new, hope. The river was behind them, its roar fading into the distance as they moved through the narrow stone passages, water dripping from the ceiling, their clothes heavy and wet, their breaths sharp in the cold air. The alien woman stumbled more than once, her legs weak from hunger and fear. But each time she faltered, the human's hand steadied her. Never harsh, never forcing, only guiding, always steady at last after what felt like endless turns. They reached a broken metal door half buried in stone. The human pushed it open with effort, the hinges screaming, and beyond lay a dark chamber. He guided her inside, closing the door behind them. The noise of the world outside dulled, replaced by silence thick and heavy. The room was old, abandoned, the remains of crates and broken tools scattered across the floor. Cobwebs clung to the corners, dust thick on every surface, yet it was shelter, hidden, a place the guards might overlook. She sank down against the wall, her chest rising and falling fast, her hands shaking, her eyes still wide with fear. "They will find us," she whispered, her voice low. "They always find us." The human knelt in front of her, his hand resting lightly on the hilt of his blade, his voice calm. "Not tonight." Her lips trembled. She shook her head. "You don't understand, they never stop. They never give up." He looked at her, steady, firm. "Then neither will I." The words silenced her, not because she believed them, but because no one had ever said such things to her before. For a long moment they sat in silence, the only sound their ragged breaths, the drip of water, the faint hum of the world outside. Finally, the human pulled a small firestone from his pouch, striking it against a shard of metal. Sparks lit the darkness, catching on dry scraps of wood. A small flame grew, pushing shadows back. The warmth reached her, soft against her cold skin, the orange glow painting the human's face, showing lines of weariness but also strength. She drew her knees to her chest, staring into the flame, her mind restless, torn. Every lesson of her life told her this was wrong. Humans were not saviors. Humans were not protectors. Yet this man had broken her chains, fought for her, carried her through a raging river. Now he lit a fire to keep her warm. Her voice cracked. "Why do you keep doing this?" He did not look at her at first, only fed the fire with a broken piece of wood, the flames growing taller. Then he said, "Because I couldn't walk away." She frowned. "What do you mean?" His eyes met hers, and for a moment she saw something deep there, a shadow of his own pain. "I have seen too many left behind," he said softly. "Too many I could not save. I will not let that happen again." Her heart clenched. She wanted to ask more, to demand who he had lost, but the look in his eyes stopped her, heavy, filled with ghosts she could not understand. She lowered her gaze, whispering, "I don't know if I can trust you." He gave a faint nod. "Not hurt, not surprised. Then don't trust me," he said. "Trust what I do." The words struck her harder than chains, because she could not deny them. His actions spoke louder than anything else, louder than the stories, louder than her fear. Her eyes stung with tears, she quickly wiped them away, ashamed, but the firelight revealed them. The human said nothing, only handed her a small cloth from his pouch, clean and dry. She took it slowly, her fingers brushing his hand again. The touch brief but real, her heart beating faster. She cleaned her wrists, the deep red marks where the iron had cut into her skin, the sting sharp but freeing. The human leaned back against the wall across from her, his blade beside him, his body finally relaxing, but his eyes still alert, watching the shadows, always guarding. She stared at him through the firelight, her mind spinning, her voice soft, almost afraid of the answer. "Why me?" He turned his head slightly, his expression unreadable. "Because you were the one in chains," her lips parted. No words came because it was too simple, too real. She hugged her knees tighter, the fire warming her, the silence stretching between them. But it was no longer heavy with fear. It was heavy with questions, dangerous questions. For the first time in her life, she felt something stir inside her chest. Not pain, not anger, but something softer, fragile. Something she dared not name, hope. But with hope came fear, because if she let herself believe, if she let herself feel, then losing it would destroy her. She closed her eyes, her body trembling. But this time not from chains, not from whips, but from the confusion of emotions she did not understand. The human leaned his head back against the wall, his eyes still open, his voice quiet. "Rest. You'll need your strength." She shook her head, whispering, "I can't. If I close my eyes, they will come. They always come." His gaze softened, his voice steady. "If they come, I will be here." The promise was dangerous, foolish, impossible, and yet, as she sat there in the glow of the fire, her eyes heavy with exhaustion, she found herself wanting to believe it. And as her body gave in, her head slowly resting against the wall, her eyes closing despite her fear, she realized something that shook her more than chains ever had. She was not bracing for pain anymore. She was bracing for something far more terrifying, trusting a human to keep her safe. The fire burned low, its light soft against the walls of the hidden chamber. The alien woman sat with her knees drawn close, her eyes half closed, drifting between fear and exhaustion. She had told herself she would not sleep, that she could not trust anyone enough, but the warmth of the flames and the steady presence of the human beside her finally pulled her into restless dreams. When she woke, the fire was nothing more than glowing embers. Yet the human was still there, sitting against the wall with his blade across his lap, his eyes sharp, awake, guarding. She blinked, her throat dry, her voice weak. "You did not sleep." He shook his head slowly, his gaze still scanning the shadows. "I couldn't." Her chest tightened, not with fear this time, but with something strange, something she had never felt before. Guilt, because he had sacrificed his rest for her safety. Before she could speak, a sound broke the silence, faint but real. The low echo of boots in the distance, the horns of the hunters once again calling through the tunnels. Her body stiffened, her hands clutched at the floor. "They've found us," she whispered. The human rose to his feet in one smooth motion, his voice calm but firm. "Then we move." She pushed herself up, her legs shaking, her heart racing, fear clawing at her chest, but this time, something was different. She did not think of running alone. She did not think of hiding. She thought only of staying with him. He opened the broken door, motioning for her to follow, his hand brushing lightly against her back, guiding her forward. Not forcing, not chaining, but protecting. The tunnels beyond were dark, their walls slick with water, the echoes of pursuit closing in. She stumbled once, nearly falling, but his hand caught hers, steadying her, their fingers locking together. Her heart jolted, her breath caught. She wanted to pull away, but she didn't, she couldn't. Instead, she tightened her grip, the warmth of his hand chasing away the cold fear. They ran together, their steps quick, their breaths harsh, until at last the tunnel opened into a wide cavern, light pouring from cracks in the ceiling. But they were not alone. A squad of guards waited there, weapons drawn, eyes gleaming with cruelty. Her stomach dropped, her voice broke. "We cannot win." The human stepped forward, placing himself between her and the guards, his blade ready, his stance unshaken. "Then we do not fight alone," he said. She stared at him, confusion flooding her. "What do you mean?" He turned his head just enough for her to see his eyes. Calm, steady, burning with quiet fire. "You are stronger than you believe." Her chest ached. His words struck deep, and in that moment something inside her cracked wide open. All her life she had braced for pain, for cruelty, for chains, but now, with him standing before her, daring to face death to protect her, she felt something she had never allowed herself to feel before. Courage. The guards advanced, their boots striking against stone. The human lifted his blade, but before they reached him, she stepped forward, standing at his side, her body trembling but her eyes fierce. "I will not run," she whispered, her voice shaking but strong. "Not anymore." The human glanced at her, and for the first time a faint smile touched his lips, a rare and quiet thing. Then we faced them together. The battle came fast, steel clashing, shouts echoing, sparks lighting the cavern. The human fought with skill and fury, each strike sure, each movement precise, and for the first time she moved with him, not as a prisoner, not as a burden, but as someone who refused to be broken. She grabbed a fallen weapon, her hands clumsy but determined, swinging it to strike back at the guards who came too close. Her fear still there, but buried beneath something stronger. Side by side they fought, and when at last the cavern grew silent, the guards lay scattered on the stone floor. Her chest heaved, sweat and tears on her face, her hands shaking around the weapon, but she was still standing, still alive. The human lowered his blade, his breath heavy, his body bleeding from cuts, yet his eyes remained steady, fixed on her. She dropped the weapon, her legs weak, her voice breaking. Why would you risk everything for me?" He stepped closer, his hand brushing gently against her shoulder, his touch careful, his voice quiet. "Because no one should face the world alone." Her heart ached. Her throat burned, tears filled her eyes, but she did not turn away, she let them fall, because for the first time they were not tears of fear, but of release. She looked at him, her voice soft but certain. "I thought humans were only pain." His eyes held hers, steady, unwavering. "And now?" he asked. Her lips trembled, a faint smile breaking through the tears. "Now I know they can be hope." The silence between them was heavy, not with fear but with something deeper, something unspoken yet real. She no longer braced for pain. She no longer hid from chains that were broken. She stood beside him, not as a captive, not as a victim, but as someone who had found courage in another's kindness. And in that hidden cavern with blood and fire around them, an unbreakable bond was born. One forged not in fear, but beyond it. The bond between a human and the alien he had freed. A bond that would change them both forever.